Welcome to a self-published author's diary. I am Elodie Novodatsky. I write about first times, second chances, things that scare the crap out of me, and things that make me laugh out loud. I'll be speaking with you and sharing my adventures in self-publishing, the behind the scenes of writing, and the business side of it. And before we get started today, a small message from our sponsor, Anchor. Thanks for listening. Hello, and welcome again to, or maybe not again, maybe you're new to this podcast, so just welcome to a self-published author's diary, the podcast. I'm Elodie, as I've said in the introduction, and today I'm going to be talking about writing as a means of catharsis. And I started thinking about it when I was writing this week an article for the Ulman Foundation about some of the things I went through in the past couple of years when it comes to treatments and everything, and being diagnosed. I was diagnosed in 2017 with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I'm currently in remission. I've had quite a few treatments throughout the years, and I wrote an article, and I will probably share the actual article with the podcast whenever it's published. But right now I'm just talking more about the process of writing that article and some of the emotions that writing it has made me either realize or been able to go through, or kind of put me back also a little bit in that spot. So like working through some things, and how I've also done that with my books. And I think sometimes, as a writer, I channel some of the emotions I work through some of the emotions that I'm going through at the moment via the storyline. And it's not to say that it's the same situations at all for the characters, what they're going through. But if I'm going through, if I'm writing about somebody who is thinking about how to overcome certain things, like I might channel some of the emotions that I have felt myself in order to put them on the paper. Or channeling might be the wrong term, but I am able to work out some of those emotions on the paper. Writing has always been very important to me, even prior to publishing, and even without the publishing side of it. Writing still feels to this day very important to me personally. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And without further ado, I guess I'll do the transition to the first part of this week's episode. The second part is about my revision of The Leftover Bride. I am updating you on a revelation I had and how important it is for me to let that little revelation simmer, not for very long because I'm on deadline, but extending the pre-order has really helped me with that. So those are the topics for the day. Good morning. It's 11:15 a.m. on August 11th. There's a heat warning where I am living in Maryland, so we walked the dog. I walked the dog. I was by myself. I walked the dog pretty early in the morning, and of course he barked, and I crossed my fingers. He didn't wake up anybody. It wasn't that early. Like, I didn't do it first thing when I got up. I did it like after breakfast and everything, so I mean, it was not that early, but yeah, he's a beagle, so he is pretty loud when he barks. Anyhow, not the point of this podcast. Maybe I should do a Plato the Beagle and Bobby Voltaire the Cat podcast, but today I am going to talk a little bit about writing an article for the Ulman Foundation. And the Ulman Foundation is a non-profit organization. So their mission is, we change lives by creating a community of support for young adults and their loved ones impacted by cancer. And they contacted me a couple of months ago to ask me if I would be willing to write an article for their blog or their newsletter. And I did not see the email right away, so I did not respond right away. And then when I responded, it was for an interview at the time, but now it's like it turned into me writing an article. And the reason why is because when I was going through treatments at the University of Maryland, I was lucky to get the help of one of their patient navigators. And she basically made treatment days, like there was a distraction within treatment days when she was coming to see us, and that was great. And by us, I mean me and my husband, who was there during every single treatment except one during COVID, because he was not allowed to come with me for the treatment. I had maintenance treatment after stem cell transplant. Writing has always been very cathartic for me. It's always been very, like writing novels. When I say cathartic, is also, for example, I wrote Trust Me Not as I was trying to, find a new normal before transplant. And it was a lot of, I had a lot of emotions that made it on the page. And my characters were not at all going what I was going through, but they were trying to move on from their trauma, and they were, facing somebody else coming their way. And so a lot of those emotions, I think, translate onto the page. And when it comes to The Leftover Bride, I've mentioned before, so that's my rom-com that's coming out on September 14th, and that I'm currently revising. And as I've said in the past, I started writing The Leftover Bride after transplant in December. So I got my transplant in October 2019, and I was able to really start writing again in December about. And when I say able, it's because you're very exhausted after a stem cell transplant, and everybody has different recovery time and everything. But I was also having issues concentrating and doing things. And so it took me a bit of time, and also of being able to write. And I started writing something that at the beginning was going to be just for fun. And then it turned into The Leftover Bride, which is still very fun. And is also now a book that I'm publishing. And when The Leftover Bride, when I started drafting it, I wanted to step away a little bit from the very heavy emotional lift that I sometimes need to do for the romantic suspense that I was writing. Because the story that I need to tell right now for the romantic suspense series, for my Gathered City series, she, like the main character, has gone through a whole lot of things. And it's not yes, there will be moments of levity and laughing and everything, but it's not there's a lot of darkness in that book in terms of what she went through, what she's about, what I'm about to make her go through again. And yes, there is hope and there is love, it's a romantic suspense. So there is love and everything, but it's still heavy. And my brain was not able to go there. It just was not able to go into that particular place at the moment. And so when I started writing The Leftover Bride, it was fun. It was just a funny, it made me laugh. It's much lighter in terms of, it's not easier to write. So let's dispel the notion that, just because it's a rom-com, it's easier to write. That's not true. It's not easier. It's just, at least not to me. Maybe it is for other people, but to me, it's not easier. It's just lighter. And by being lighter, it also enabled me to focus a little bit more on the happy, and it's just fun. And yes, Sorka, my main character, she has OCD, and it's part of who she is. It does not define her. And I did use my own experience with OCD to inform this particular character. I know it's not going to represent everybody who has OCD and or anxiety, but to her, she's she's done the work, and she has moments where it's harder, but she went through a difficult moment with it as well, especially as her life kind of unraveled when she got jilted at the altar and everything. But she has it, I don't want to say under control because, I don't know, it sounds weird when talking about OCD, but it's still something that she does have, like she has the tools for it. And anyhow, so I'm not saying that The Leftover Bride doesn't also have like topics that can be sometimes difficult to tackle. For me, it was important to have an OCD character who was like a character who has OCD, who gets her happily ever after, and who's also like, she's funny and she is talented and she has all those things going on for her, and she's trying her hardest, and she has like one of the best love stories I think I've written so far. I say that about all my books, and if I were to reread one of my older books, I would still say the same about that book too. So it's just the way it is, right? You get so involved in the story you're writing that it becomes like you think it's the best you've ever written. That's normal, right? So anyways, so basically writing is an outlet for me as well. Like it's an outlet for my emotions. Sometimes it's an outlet for me to focus on something else, or at the time of after my transplant, it was a time to focus on something like fun and funny. When after talking to Katie at the Ulman Foundation about writing an article, in my mind, I thought, okay, well, I will write this article about the help that Megan has given us throughout the years, ever since we found out about the Ulman Foundation when I started treatment. I say we all the time again because my husband has been there every single step of the way. So it really feels like even though yes, it's different, like I was the one going through treatment, he was there. So anyways, so since we started at the University of Maryland, and I wrote the first draft very quickly in the sense that I wrote it in one morning. The first, like in a few hours. The first draft was maybe 600, 700 words. And then it was pretty emotional actually to write. If you ask my husband, he will tell you. It was just a lot coming back to me, and I did not necessarily handle it at the beginning. Like it was just a lot. But I did. It was also it is very cathartic to have written and to write and to have written that article, because it enabled me to go back and analyze certain things that I went through therapy too when I went through cancer. So I had a therapist who helped me tremendously. And a lot of the recurring theme in the article that I wrote for the Ulman Foundation is not finding my words and feeling like I didn't have words to either tell people, when I first got diagnosed, and then afterwards to explain some of the things that I was going through until I also started therapy, and then I was able to, find my words again in a certain way. The recurring thing being about the words and communication and all that stuff. And at the same time, it's also explaining that sometimes you just need to ask about a dog. That's actually the title of the article. Because with Megan at the hospital, we could just really be Alex and Elodie asking about her dog during infusion. So she was part of our world without being completely part of the hospital world. So it was kind of like a window to the outside while we were inside the hospital. And it was a very nice, very helpful, tremendously helpful distraction to have while we were in the infusion room. But it's hit me. So the first draft was about 600, 700 words. Then I sent it to 3 of my friends. And thank you so much to Alison, Katie, and Sam for reading that article. If you're listening to the podcast right now, thank you again so much for your feedback. After their feedback, I updated it a little bit. So not a whole lot. Their feedback was not, it was not like it helped me make it better by expanding on it a little bit. So, well, a little bit, quite a bit, because I changed it from 600, 700 words and it's now 1,200 words. But that also because I have like a little introduction about myself at the end, which was not there in the very first. So I maybe added 300 words to the actual article. It felt very important to me to also add more about my experience about not being listened to prior to diagnosis, after diagnosis, before we switched care, actually. So I added quite a bit about that. I did not get into a lot of details about, I mentioned at some point that not being listened to resulted in terrifying moments and excruciating pain. And I don't go into details about those particular things in that article. I might at some point, but to me, I think it's also important to like not keep the story entirely for myself. I just feel it's important for me to share some of those experiences with people, and also with other patients maybe who, like me, like I write in that article, and I will share it on my blog, and I might read it on this podcast when it's published. But I write about at some point about how there is no manual to be the perfect cancer patient. And yet I was trying so hard to be a good one. And it's a lot of pressure. You feel sometimes that there are a lot of expectations put on you about how you're supposed to react to certain things, how you're supposed to be. And it's hard. Like everything about it is hard. And writing that article, I think, kind of made me realize even more, even though I'm already aware of it thanks to therapy, putting it into words felt important. And yeah, it's just made me realize again the power of words, and how even though there is a big difference between writing a nonfiction article and writing my novels, I do use my novels sometimes as a way to work through some emotions, if that makes sense. Or maybe some of my novels are informed by some of the emotions I personally felt. And again, I've never encountered a serial killer, and now my OCD is like, oh my God, now that you said that, no, I don't need to do anything to counter that thought. So it's just very interesting to me to realize I definitely want to be able to give hope to other people. That's one thing I'm striving towards when it comes to cancer and other things, but like medical diagnosis and things, but like being able to, for example, I fundraise for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. I tried to find ways. I did that online auction in 2018 that was called Let's Do Something Good Now, that benefited organizations that were helping young adults facing a cancer diagnosis. And those things are very important to me. It feels that this article is another way to help. And I still kept, even though I shared a lot in that article, I'm very vulnerable in that article. I'm very truthful in that article. I still managed to also keep some things to myself about, everything that was going on. I don't go into a lot of details for certain things, because also it's not the purpose of that particular article. It's not, going into detail about a lot of different things that I've been through. But I feel like it was important for me to do it and to write it and to also reflect a little bit more. It's a lot has happened. Let's just put it that way. Sometimes when I talk about, the transplant and everything with friends, and I go back to some of the things that happened, it hits me. It's like, wow, I really went through all of that. And here's an update on my revision. So I'm updating you on my revision on Thursday, August 12th. It's about 2:30 p.m. And this morning I had another revelation, which are great. I mean, I'm glad I pushed my book away a little bit because that revelation would have made it very hard to get it done on time. And it's towards the end of the book. There is a moment that I'm not going to disclose, but it's pretty difficult for the main characters. And something external happens that has them reevaluate to a certain extent their internal motivation. So it's usually what people call the breakup moment in the romance novels. And to me, it doesn't have to be. The main characters don't have to break up. It's a moment that's just, a difficult moment that they have to get through. And that's either really push them together at the end or cement what they've been going through before, the growth that they've been going through together before, and also really sharpens their own goals in a way. And that particular moment, well, it was happening, but it was not strong enough. I need one more detail for it to really work out. I sent a message to my critic partners on Google Chat, and I am very grateful that I got feedback. And I think that I know the way that I'm going to strengthen that moment. And I need to make sure that it all follows through for the characters and also crossing my fingers for the readers. So I'm happy I got that. I'm letting it simmer this afternoon. It sounds weird. I'm not talking about cooking, but I'm letting that realization simmer this afternoon because I need to just have as much clarity as possible on the mechanism of what's going to happen, because that means I'm going to have to do just a few changes in earlier chapters. Not big changes. It's just the thread of what's going to happen needs to be sewn into the novel just a tiny bit earlier with just a few sentences. So it's not something that's going to be like all the time there in the main character's mind, but it needs to be slightly added to the novel. So this is something that I'm going to be probably just writing out a little bit before typing it. And so I'll be working on that part tomorrow. I also added in the past, so on Tuesday, I added about more than 3,000 words, which hadn't happened in a while. And yesterday I added about 1,000 words, and then I revised half of a chapter. So I've been working on getting this revision ready, and this morning after getting that, revelation in a way about what needed to be stronger in that particular point in the manuscript, I went back to the very beginning, and just now I'm proofreading the beginning. And I needed to add 2 or 3 sentences at the beginning, not about that particular aspect, but about another aspect that I thought the thread needed to be hint upon earlier in the book. So I'm working on that, and I'm really I reread, and actually if you are in my Facebook's Cozy Nook, which I know I don't post super regularly in, I'm trying to do more Teasers Tuesdays, but the best regular way to get news from me and my novels outside of the podcast is my newsletter, and which you can sign up on. There's the link in this episode's description. So I shared the first paragraph of the second chapter, of Ryan's first chapter, in the Cozy Nook yesterday, this morning, because I was rereading it, and it's very strong first paragraph for a character. I feel it's just a very strong paragraph. So let me read it to you. I still can't believe I'm back on the East Coast in Swans Cove, the town that's filled with some of my best memories and some of my worst. My plan was to go straight to my parents, but I had to stop at the bakery. After all, Mom loves their lemon pie, And what type of son who hasn't come home in over 10 years wouldn't get his mom her favorite dessert if he could? Nothing to do with the breathtaking redhead staring up at me like I stomped all over her heart. My jaw clenches with years of regrets, remorse, and messed up chances. And in the manuscript, it's not messed up, it's another word. But I don't know if I use the other word, if I'm going to have to put this podcast episode as explicit. I have no idea. I really should check into that. So this was the revision for today in a sense, because as I said, I went back and started proofreading the first chapters and adding a few sentences that I needed to add on the notes that I had left myself. Another snippet that I did on August 10th, which was from that particular revision on that day. He must have taken lessons on how to master his puppy eyes from Fluffy Napoleon, because even with the gust of Arctic air sending shivers up and down my spine, I melt at the way he looks at me. So, as I mentioned, I'm really in love with this story that you can purchase for only 99 cents right now. You can pre-order it for only 99 cents right now. Links are in this episode's description. So some of the things I Googled this week, let me see. Ball of yarn cat, synonym for buzzing, synonym for slither. How do you call the way a snake moves? I just wanted to make sure it was called slither, and then I wanted a synonym for it. Oh, and this week I also received an email from a reader, and that just made my day. It was a very nice email, and it was a very, very nice email about about two of my bilingual books. And yeah, I'm so grateful to readers who find my books and take the time to let me know how excited they are for the next one. This was great. So my plan for next week is to continue revising, and I'll keep you updated on the progress. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, if you have a second, don't hesitate to rate, review, subscribe. That really, really helps. And if you're a writer, happy writing. And to everyone, happy reading.